been interested in design since before I even knew what design was, really. I was always making things, I was always conceiving of things. I've always, crucially, been interested in physically making things myself. Not only because I was interested in doing that, but I think because I had the ability to do that.
Hard is it? I mean, what is, when you think about it, has influenced the way you look at?
It's popular culture in general. I guess it's art, it's film, it's music. I think any designer has to be aware of all of those things in order to be a good designer or a relevant designer. But I think more than anything, it's the fact that I've traveled so much. And I've lived in a lot of different countries. I'm from Australia, I live in England, but I've lived in France and I've lived in Japan. I traveled a lot as a child. And the fact that, you know, I've met lots of different people from all over the world. And I think that's given me an interesting insight. And one of the things about design is that it's a truly international business. You know, unlike, say, the film industry or the music industry or the fashion industry, which can be sort of geographically specific. You know,
Products are sold across all national boundaries.
There's absolutely no difference. You know, you design something and it can be sold in China, it can be sold in the US, it can be sold in Australia. There's very little difference in that sense.
It is said by those who look at your work and who comment on it that Japan had a major influence.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I love Japanese culture for that very reason. I mean, design.
You love it for what reason?
That they have such a sort of a cerebral and such a deep understanding of what we refer to as design. I mean, I don't think they refer to it as design because it's almost part of their religion, I think, in a way. And I love the fact that in Japanese culture, so many things are so kind of coherent. I mean, you can relate food to religion, to kind of flower arranging, to architecture, to building, to crafts. And all of these things seem to be kind of related to one another. And I think that gives Japanese people a very sophisticated understanding of things like detail and style. Things that I love. But I feel like in a sense they've had a bit of a head start culturally.
They've been there a while.
Somehow, yeah.
You know, incredible, let's say, journey, because I think now it's maybe more than 2 years working on the project. So of course it takes a long time, but I understand now why it takes a long time, because this process is really very, very long, you know, to make blade. It's crazy organic process. So, and it's the second time I've been here as well. So now I feel like I understand how the process is working, which is really great.
I'm being inducted into a new world. It's very futuristic, very retro, very cool, and very male.
Actually, it's his world.
He's Marc Newson, one of the hottest designers on the planet, and he designs, well, everything.
A car, a jet, a suborbital jet rocket, a spaceship, and sculptural furniture, ovens, sculptural lights, labs, sculptural everything, dish drainer, suitcases, vibrator, shoes, interiors, sneakers, actually, binoculars, luggage, torch, taps, tables, numerous tables, mobile telephones, chairs, of course.
Is there anything you haven't designed, Marc?
Yes, but I can't remember what it is. I haven't got a clue.
Fortunately, we have. Marc Newson's work sells for record prices in the world's leading auction houses and galleries. He's hired by the world's largest corporations to think out of the box. And he operates at the cutting edge of industrial technology, heading for the final frontier. But where does it all come from? And how does he keep it all in his head?
Marc Newson's taking me on a trip from 60s Australia to 21st century space to show me who he is, what he does, and why he does it.
I'm proud to say I'm a geek. You'd have to be a geek. Designers are geeks. Good designers are geeks. Bad designers are not geeks. I think there's a correlation. Geeks are interested in detail. They're obsessed. They're interested in the sort of the minutiae of how things work. And if you're not, then how can you really know what you're doing?
Marc Newson matters because he's different in a world of sameness. This is sort of design at volume 11, and it's screaming at you. And either you're going to like that or you're not.
In a way, Marc has very sensibly used his career as a designer to fulfil all his sort of boy's own space-age fantasies. You've got the car, you've got the plane, now we've got the rocket.
Design, I think, has always been a part of my life. You know, at the age of 10 years old, I can remember sort of ripping a watch apart that my uncle had given me and sort of attempting to put it back together again. So I was always aware of building things, really, kind of creating things. The evolution of digital technology with relation to design and how designers use that, how young designers are able to use that. In fact, how anyone's able to use that. You know, you don't even need to be a designer to design things. You know, you can spit things out on a three-dimensional printer. I mean, my 5-year-old daughter could do it. In fact, every time I try and help my daughter to sort of draw a picture or make something, I kind of get, you know, dissed. You know, she doesn't think I'm very good. One of the things about design in general is that by necessity, it's an international industry. I mean, there's nothing geographically specific about design. You know, the iPhone is the same in China as it is in, you know, Punta del Este or wherever else it is. Things have changed an enormous amount. You know, in 50 years we'll look back and this will be like the Industrial Revolution. But it's not necessarily the future that I had anticipated when I was 10 years old. You know, I really thought I'd be in space. You know, I had the opportunity to go to the moon. I think everyone did. For me, the future is simply not as optimistic as I thought it was going to be. You know, the kind of sense of utopia certainly didn't kind of pan out, which is sad in a way, you know, sad for my kids. And sad when I see my daughter operating an iPad, but she would never have known what it was like, you know, what it took to get there. Having said that, you know, in 60 or 70 years' time, it will be, you know, that may seem fairly antiquated for her, so maybe I'm just being nostalgic.
He does create objects that have a kind of immediate desirability about them. It's a very special gift to be able to endow inanimate objects with that kind of charm.
And now, she's ready for her close-up. Marc Newson was just 23 when he made 13 of these improbable objects with his bare hands. He couldn't get rid of them then. These days, they're so valuable, we're not even allowed to sit on them.
Is it comfortable?
Well, no, not really. It was never really intended to be comfortable, but when I was in art school, my sort of rule of thumb was that if it was more comfortable than a bus stop, it would sort of generally qualified as being something something worth sitting on. But it was kind of more of a sculpture, I think, than a chair. The chair was just a way of was an excuse to bring it to life.
In the back of his mind, Jacques-Louis David's famous portrait of Madame Récamier on a chaise of the traditional variety. The Lockheed reference came later, in homage to the Lockheed Corporation, when Marc realised his riveted aluminium exterior recalled aircraft construction.
You know, I had this vision of an object in my head. I mean, I had the shape in my head, and I had the material in my head. I mean, I had its sort of visual aspect. I mean, I had a pretty accurate idea of what it looked like. A globule of mercury or something, like a seamless, smooth, shiny object. But I really didn't know how I was going to do it. You know, I had no idea how I was going to realise this on a technical level.
How did you?
I got this big lump of foam in the backyard of a workshop that I was, a friend's workshop that I was sharing. And I sort of traced some lines on with a giant felt tip pen and started literally hacking away at this big lump of foam with a wire brush, a very, very sort of savage wire brush, and just kind of furiously sort of hacked away. And there was just like shit all over the place, you know, foam flying around in the neighbour's house, and it felt like a monumental moment for me. Because when it was done, it was done. It just sort of appeared. And then came, you know, the challenge of having to make it look like a piece of metal. I never really originally wanted it to be covered in panels. You know, this was really the only way I could think of achieving something close to the effect that I'd visualised.
You designed practically everything from soap dishes to jets and Aquariva. What is the project that stayed in your memory and that you remember with most joy and pride?
Ooh, it's a very difficult question because I've designed, as you say, so many different things. The thing that really inspires me and the thing which interests me is the ability to be able to design many different types of projects. You know, because as a designer, I'm a kind of problem solver. You know, I'm a person which, I feel like a gun for hire, like a kind of troubleshooter. So clients come to me and in a way I'm like a sort of psychologist. You know, they come to me with a kind of problem and I try to help them solve the problem. So that's what interests me. It's not really for me about particular objects. You know, I mean, I design so many things. It's really impossible to understand which one I like, which one I don't like. I mean, everyone occupies a different space in my, in my kind of, consciousness.
What is your relationship with fashion?
Well, my relationship with fashion is interesting. I mean, obviously I'm a guy and I have to wear clothes. So I look at it in a very pragmatic and a very rational way. You know, I have to spend money on this stuff that I wear. So at a certain point I thought, when G-Star first approached me to do a capsule collection 10 years ago, I was very apprehensive at the beginning, and then I thought, oh no, you know, why not? Because I'm a consumer. I have to spend money on this stuff. Why shouldn't I have a choice in having, as a creative person, why shouldn't I have a choice in the kind of garments that I have to spend my money on? So, you know, my relationship to fashion is a very pragmatic one. I see that the book really details very, very seriously the process by which I make things, because that's kind of really what interests me. From the very, very conceptual parts at the beginning where I'm modelling, in this particular case, modelling things digitally, which has not always been the case, to building the thing in reality. And that's just the Gagosian stuff, which kind of, and there's all sorts of other stuff here. Early works in carbon fibre, knives, other objects, surfboard that I made for a guy called Garrett McNamara, with Garrett riding the wave. So it's, and the board was actually shown at Gagosian and sort of sold as a piece of sculpture. Some more recent work, which is a bed that I designed for Magis. It's a bunk bed actually for kids, my kids specifically. Mobile telephones dating back to 2003. This was a big hit in Japan. 10 years old already. It was the thinnest phone on the market at that point in time. You know, things like kitchenware projects for Nike. This is a pair of shoes I designed for them. Even insignificant things like T-shirts, luggage for Samsonite, and like a sort of an inflatable version of the airplane I designed for Cartier. Projects that I've done for Dom Perignon over the years, with whom I've had a long-standing collaboration. Things for the kitchen with Smeg. More packaging for a Japanese company this time called Ajinomoto. And work for Taschen, the publisher. I've actually designed a number of different packaging for Taschen. This was a box for the Apollo 11 book that Taschen published.
Marc originally sold his Lockheed lounges for about £1,000. 22 years later, they're breaking records.
550,000, 600,000.
Not bad for his first project post-art school.
Back on the telephone, it's going to go. £650,000. Last chance in the room. Sold
With a
there.
tap of the hammer, the Lockheed becomes the most expensive piece of furniture by a living designer ever to sell at auction. Aggregate price, just over £750,000. Over $1.5 million.
Marc, for better or worse, and not always to his liking, is the undisputed star of what's called the sort of design art market. And this is the market for limited edition furniture, sort of sculptural in very improbable shapes, generally uncomfortable to sit on, and usually extortionately expensive. And this is a market that's been developing over the last decade, but in the last year or two has absolutely exploded.
Marc Newson still designs limited edition furniture, but he doesn't make it all by himself anymore. So who does? Well, he travelled the world to find people with the right skills. People who could create the seamless shapes of metal that he had in his head without the rivets of the Lockheed lounge. And he ended up with this lot in an Aston Martin panel beating workshop just outside Milton Keynes.
It was sort of stumbling into an Aladdin's cave. I knew once I got here that the ideas that I had in my head were doable.
We get a lot of people come around here, Japanese, Americans, Europeans. They walk in here and they're absolutely gobsmacked that people still take a flat sheet of metal and turn it into something.
I've just never seen anyone that works with metal in the way that they do. What they do is more akin to silversmithing. You know, they really work metal as if it was a piece of fabric or a piece of plasticine. What you see at the end of the day is this kind of incredibly sensual and refined object.
Amongst the cars, a Marc Newson creation is emerging.
What is this object?
It's the black hole table.
You like it?
Not especially, no. It's not one of my favourite pieces. I mean, it's one of them things I think you either love it or hate it, but each to their own.
Marc loves being here, and he can't wait to get stuck in. Richard, on the other hand, can't wait to get a few things off his chest.
These have been a nightmare.
Really? The worst one?
You know, I'm not a fashion designer at all. I don't see myself as a fashion designer. Nevertheless, I live in a real world and I'm a consumer.
What do your projects have in common? Is there a guideline, something like that?
Well, my projects, I hope, have something in common. You know, I hope that there's a thread which links all of my things together. It's very difficult for me to see if that's true or not. But I guess, you know, if I look through my book now that I have this big book, which has just been released by Taschen, I can see some a kind of DNA, you know, which exists in all of my work. But honestly speaking, it's much easier for other people to see than for me.
What is the fundamental part of design for you?
Really understanding materials and technology and processes. You know, if I was a writer, you know, materials are like the vocabulary of a writer. You know, the more words you have, the easier it is to express yourself. So it is with me, and the more knowledge I have about materials and processes and technology, the more interesting things I can design.
So what about aesthetics?
Well, aesthetics is always, is maybe the most important thing, but ultimately it comes to my personal taste. I mean, it's all about what I think is cool, what I think is interesting, what I think is necessary. So, some people like what I do, some people maybe they don't like what I do, but, it's difficult for me to comment. But I think I have a very particular taste, and I believe also very strongly in good taste.
With a spark-eroded moon, surface of the moon, which is where one of the places that they landed, was uploaded from a satellite and then etched into, spark-eroded into a surface of aluminium. More recent products, a series of things for the bathroom, taps. These pieces are just coming on the market in September, actually, for an Australian company, a fantastic Australian company called Caroma, and they really lead the world in the development of bathroom products, specifically with a view to low consumption of water. Australia really leads the world in how to use no water, because basically they don't have any water. So lovely to be working with a company in Australia, which is my homeland. Unfortunately, they're few and far between, but a very comprehensive range. This is a more recent project that I designed for Pentax, which came out almost a year ago now. I think that's been quite a success. And again, the book really shows the process from the digital imagery, rapid prototyping, choosing samples, approving the initial injection moldings, just to make sure that everything was running smoothly along the way. More kids' products, and even a range of clothing that I have designed for G-Star. I've been working with G-Star for the last long time, actually, almost 8 years. And a lot of these garments actually have become sort of cult garments. You will have seen celebrities wearing these at the MTV Awards and things like that. The Concorde print was quite a cult object. The Galaxy jacket was also pretty popular. Apparently very popular with Justin Bieber. I don't know if I've ever thought of myself really as an artist, although I do kind of think these pieces are really more sculpture than they are design. But my fascination really lies with materials and processes and techniques, and I love the idea of pushing the boundaries of these. There was a really interesting opportunity to create some really large, big, beautiful glass pieces, because it really is an incredible material. These pieces are cast, and they're cast in an oven, so the stuff has to melt in a mold. And that process alone can take up to 6 months. Colour's always an important thing for me.